Now this is a slide. This is a liver biopsy which shows this is a portal tract. It shows dense infiltration by predominantly plasma cells. Here you can see these plasma cells with eccentrically placed nuclei and a moderate amount of cytoplasm. All these are plasma cells. Apart from that, you see something known as interphase hepatitis. Now, like if you remember, I told you there's a limiting plate, which that is, it is formed by a discontinuous layer of hepatocytes with the portal tract. Now, in interphase hepatitis, what happens is these inflammatory cells, they spill over this plate and they go into the surrounding liver, thus damaging these liver hepatocytes. So you can see this is an area where you should see interphase hepatitis. Again, another area which you're seeing interphase hepatitis. Now, seeing interphase hepatitis means there is activity in the biopsy. This is another picture which again shows portal inflammation. Now, all these hepatocytes, if you compare these hepatocytes with the ones here, they have swelled up. There is ballooning of the hepatocytes. There is interphase hepatitis again. And there is formation of hepatocyte rosettes. That is, these hepatocytes group together and form a rosette-like structure. This is lobular inflammation, where we can see again all these are plasma cells. And there is ballooning degeneration of the hepatocytes. And this is emperipolysis, where you see ballooned hepatocytes containing engulfed lymphocytes. Lymphocytes are like these rounded, will have larger nuclei and very scant cytoplasm. Now, coming to hepatitis B, one feature which is seen in hepatitis B is the ground glass appearance of hepatocytes. That is, these are liver cells which have an eosinophilic glassy or a granular appearance. Now, this is seen due to accumulation of HBsAg in the endoplasmic reticulum. Here again, you can see all these hepatocytes with a ground glass appearance. The stains which can be used to demonstrate this are Aucine and Victoria Blue, and we can also do an IHC to demonstrate the HBsAg antigen. This is, if you see, this is this is an Aucine stain. It demonstrates the hepatitis B surface antigen infected cells. Now, coming to hepatitis C, there are two things which you see here. One is steatosis, macrovesicular steatosis, and portal inflammation with formation of lymphoid follicles. So this is a lymphoid follicle. You see these are the hepatocytes here which show macrovesicular steatosis, that is a fat lipid droplet replacing the entire hepatocyte, pushing the nuclei to the periphery. Here you can see the nuclei is pushed towards the periphery. And then you see this is the portal area where you're seeing a lymphoid follicle. This is another hyper view which shows presence of a lymphoid follicle within the portal area with a prominent germinal center. Now, coming to non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, you see there are various patterns. Pattern 1 is simple steatosis where there is no inflammation or fibrosis. Pattern 2 is steatosis with lobular inflammation, ballooning, but absent fibrosis. Pattern 3 and 4 is what constitutes NASH. So the diagnosis of NASH requires the presence of steatosis, ballooning, inflammation, and variable fibrosis in the absence of alcohol. This is just to show you the fatty change. You can see the fatty change which is replacing this is macrovesicular steatosis. Again, the lipid droplets, fat droplets in the hepatocytes pushing the nuclei towards this periphery. This is a case where you're seeing many ballooned out hepatocytes, and in some areas you can see these eosinophilic inclusions here, the arrows. These are the Mallory bodies. And this is a cell which has undergone apoptosis with dense eosinophilic cytoplasm. This is again lobular inflammation, where you can see inflammatory cells which could be mononuclear or polymorphonuclear around the hepatocytes, all these areas, the arrows. This is what you see in stage 1, where there is perivenular and pericellular fibrosis. This is the Mason's trichrome. You can see the pericellular fibrosis here. This is NASH-induced cirrhosis. You can see these fibrous bands enclosing nodules of hepatocytes here. This is a trichrome stain. Now coming to alcohol liver disease, it has the same, almost the same features. There are some differences which I'll tell you after I finish describing alcoholic steatohepatitis. Now, alcoholic liver disease includes hepatic steatosis, alcoholic steatohepatitis, and cirrhosis. So in hepatic steatosis, again, there is small microvesicular lipid droplet which accumulates within the hepatocytes. With chronic intake, macrovesicular steatosis develops in zone 1, and these changes are reversible. Now, in alcoholic steatohepatitis, as the name suggests, there is steatosis, there is associated hepatocellular injury, and fibrosis. Now, what are the features that we see in alcoholic steatohepatitis? Almost the same: hepatocellular swelling and necrosis causing ballooning degeneration of the hepatocytes. There is cholestasis, which could be both cellular and canalicular cholestasis. This formation of Mallory bodies, that is, these are eosinophilic inclusions of intermediate filaments in the degenerating hepatocytes. And neutrophilic satellitosis, that is, when these Mallory bodies are chemotactic, they attract the neutrophils. And we see fibrosis, which is initially seen as sinusoidal and perivenular. Then the final stage of ALD is cirrhosis, and we see the Lennox cirrhosis, that is, there is ischemic necrosis and fibrous obliteration of the nodules, which leads to broad expanses of tough, pale scar tissue. This is the case liver biopsy, where you see again ballooned out hepatocytes containing these intracytoplasmic inclusions, which are they are known as what? What did I say just now? If anybody is listening.
The Mallory-Denk bodies.
Yeah. So these are Mallory-Denk bodies. And like I said, these are chemotactic. So when they start attracting neutrophils, so you will see neutrophils around the ballooned out hepatocyte. This is again another picture which shows Mallory-Denk bodies with fatty change, macrovesicular fatty change, macrovesicular steatosis. Now, since the features are almost the same, how do we differentiate? In alcoholic steatohepatitis, there is steatosis, frequent Mallory bodies with neutrophilic satellitosis and cholestasis. Non-alcoholic steatohepatitis will show steatosis without cholestasis and a few Mallory bodies. And if we have a history of alcoholism, we can label it as alcoholic steatohepatitis. This is just to show you how cholestasis looks. Cholestasis can be intrahepatic or hepatocellular or canalicular. Hepatocellular is when the cholestasis is seen within the hepatocytes, as in these areas you can see hepatocellular cholestasis here. Canalicular is, you will see bile plugs in the canaliculi surrounded by these hepatocytes. Now there are some stages and grades. I'll just tell you the names. You can look up later. In chronic hepatitis, that is hepatitis B and C, we follow the modified Ishak's histological activity score, and a score is given out of 18. The fibrosis is staged out of 6. Ishak staging out, and we stage it out of 6. For autoimmune hepatitis, we give a fibrosis score. We can use either Ishak or Mitavis score, and whichever score we are giving, we have to specify which score we have used. In NASH, pardon?
No, it's okay.
Okay. In NASH, this activity score is given out of 8 based on steatosis, ballooning degeneration, and lobular inflammation. And the fibrosis, we follow NASH CRN staging. This is just you can look up the Ishak and Mitavir and all later on. Now coming to primary biliary cholangitis, here it's the histological hallmark of primary biliary cholangitis is a florid duct lesion, which is defined as granulomatous destruction of the bile duct. There is loss of medium-sized interlobular bile ducts, which is focal and variable within the liver, and there is dense lymphocytic infiltrate in the portal tract. There's the biopsy. You can see there is dense inflammation in the portal area. These are the portal areas. This is a hypa. You can see there is a granuloma. Granuloma is a collection of histiocytes here in the portal area. Now here what you see is a bile duct. The bile duct shows some sort of epithelial damage. That is, there is crowding. They're haphazardly arranged. There is intense eosinophilia of the cytoplasm. And also there is lymphocytic infiltration of the bile duct epithelium. These dot-like structures which you see, these are lymphocytes which are infiltrating the bile duct epithelium. And surrounding that, you see a granuloma. This granuloma is non-suppurative. This is another picture which shows damage to the bile duct. This is the bile duct with a granuloma around it. And again, lymphocytic infiltration of the bile duct epithelium. Sometimes we will see a ductular reaction that is characterized by an increased number of bile ducts. All these are increased number of bile ducts associated with an inflammatory infiltrate, which is mainly lymphocytes and few plasma cells, and associated fibrosis. Now coming to primary sclerosing cholangitis, the classic finding is concentric onion skin fibrosis around the affected medium-sized bile ducts. There is progressive atrophy of the bile duct epithelium with obliteration of the lumen, which leaves a fibrous scar. There can be absence of intralobular ducts or ductopenia as it's called, bile duct proliferation and cholestasis, and it shows a typical biliary jigsaw pattern, the later stage. Here you see a bile duct which shows a periductal concentric. It's concentric onion skin fibrosis. You can see the fibrosis around it. This is another picture which shows concentric fibrosis around the bile duct. Here again there is concentric fibrosis. Here the nodular scar has replaced a bile duct. So we can't see the bile duct at all in this picture. And this is the biliary type jigsaw pattern of cirrhosis in primary sclerosing cholangitis. One more thing, autoimmune cholangitis also shows same features as that of primary biliary cholangitis, except that AMA is negative in autoimmune cholangitis. The picture of PBC and autoimmune cholangitis are the same. I'll just quickly describe the granulomas. Now, granuloma we know is a distinct lesion which is characterized by accumulation of mononuclear cells, mainly the macrophages in the center. They may be surrounded by a rim of fibroblasts or lymphocytes. The lesion may or may not be well circumscribed, but it is separate from the adjacent uninvolved tissue. Now, we can get granulomas which are portal based or they're in the lobules. Now, portal-based granulomas more likely to be associated with drugs or biliary tract disease. And the lobular granulomatous inflammation is more likely to be infectious or drug-induced. So this is a biopsy. You see the liver here, liver tissue here, and here you see a granuloma. It's a small sarcoid-like granuloma. Basically, it's non-necrotizing. It's just a collection of histiocytes. This is again a liver biopsy showing a granuloma here. And this granuloma, you can see a lot of these eosinophils, which are these brightly orangophilic cytoplasm. All these are eosinophils. Now, this could be because of drugs. It could be because of parasites. This is another granuloma where you can see this is the liver tissue, and this is the granuloma here, with center showing necrosis. So it's a necrotizing granuloma, which can be seen in tuberculosis, but we have to also see whether these granulomas can be seen in other infectious conditions as well. So the presence of granulomas have to be taken in clinical context. Can anyone quickly say what granuloma this is? I just described it.
Dr. Karthik, are you there? Dr. Karthik?
Sir, good evening, sir. Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening. Can you just tell me what granuloma, which condition this is?
Ma'am, this is
Okay, this is a case of primary biliary cholangitis. I just
Okay.
showed you. This is the damaged bile duct again with showing granulomas around it, around the bile duct.
okay, ma'am.
Okay. This is the lipogranuloma where you can see these histiocytes around vacuoles. And this is a fibrin ring granuloma where you see a central lipid droplet surrounded by an eosinophilic fibrin ring, and around it you have the histiocytes.
When do you get that? In what conditions do you get that? The fibrin,
In which condition you get that?
not this one, the next one. The next one, the lipogranuloma and the fibrin ring.
Fibrin ring
What are the
granuloma,
conditions?
yeah.
What history would you have? The fibrin ring and the previous one, lipogranuloma.
Lipogranuloma generally you can get in any condition where there can be fatty liver.
But I don't think so, because recently we had a patient, we had, we did not know whether it was NASH, was it something else, and then they gave a report as lipogranuloma. So what are the conditions you would get this? Because I think history is important, when you ask for a tissue biopsy. So can you just highlight on that?
Okay, I think we will take up the questions towards the end. Is that okay?
Yes, sir.
We lose this lipogranuloma and the other one.
Okay, so I will take a note of it and will ask.
Yeah, please ask.
Some of the questions can be put in the chat box. I will read out the questions towards the end so that it can be answered one by one. Let her finish so that the flow.
Because all the histology has to be done in correlation with the history taking. Otherwise, we'll not know what's happening.
Yeah, I understand that. We have to know the history and some findings,
biological
findings, etc.
Without history, it's very difficult to just give a slide and say this is what it is. Okay.
Okay, please proceed, Dr. Aina. That was Professor Jayanti, very senior gastroenterologist, and now currently the hepatology professor of SRMC Chennai.
Okay, sir. Okay, coming to Budd-Chiari. Budd-Chiari, as we know, there is an obstruction of hepatic veins to the obstruction from the level of hepatic veins to the superior end of inferior vena cava. So it is characterized by hemorrhage into liver cell plates with lifting of endothelial cells. There is necrosis of hepatocytes and endothelial cells with contiguous loss of hepatocytes leading to venocentric fibrosis. So here you see there is, in acute Budd-Chiari, there is hemorrhage into the perivenular and mid zones. There is marked sinusoidal dilatation, as you can see. Followed by the liver cells are showing some ischemic necrosis where you can barely see the nuclei in some of the hepatocytes. Again, you have the absence of liver cells in the absence of liver cells in these cords, in these hepatic cords. On your left hand side, you can see the liver tissue, which is viable hepatocytes. This is chronic Budd-Chiari, where you can see the perivenular zone shows venocentric fibrosis, which extends into the mid-zonal sinusoids, and the surrounding hepatocytes appear atrophic. This is again where you see marked sinusoidal dilatation and congestion in the pericentral or perivenular region with loss of hepatocytes. We may sometimes even see a thrombus in the hepatic vein. This is a case of sinusoidal obstruction syndrome, where there is congestion and hemorrhage into the zone 3 with spillage of RBCs in between hepatocytes, and there is associated hepatocyte necrosis. I'm sorry. This is coming to sinusoidal obstruction syndrome. This is caused due to primary injury of the endothelial cells of the sinusoids and small vessels. What we see here is the sinusoidal congestion and hemorrhage with subtotal hepatocellular necrosis in zone 3. There is collagen deposition in the sinusoids and small hepatic veins and apparent occlusion of the hepatic veins. This finding is unique and is specific for sinusoidal obstruction syndrome. Along with that, there is pericellular and sinusoidal fibrosis. So what we see here is there is congestion and hemorrhage into the zone 3. This is the zone 3 area with spillage of RBCs in between the hepatocytes, which is associated with hepatocellular necrosis. Yeah. This is again, you see a hemorrhage into the vein, wall of the vein.
Adya, please mute. Adya, please mute. Okay, carry on.
So this Mason's trichrome demonstrates here, you can see the Mason's trichrome which is demonstrating the vein, and in between that you have these red collagen deposition, and the vein is almost collapsed here. And there is pericellular fibrosis, this as demonstrated by Mason's trichrome. This is again showing sinusoidal marked edema and congestion of the hepatocytes, of the hepatic sinusoids with compression of the hepatic cords. And here if you see, this is the central vein. This is the hyper view where you can see there's almost a complete collapse of the central vein with endothelial lining appearing to fill the lumen. This is the collapse of the central vein. Yeah.
Okay, so you have finished liver,
Yes,
and there are a couple of questions. The zone 3 hemorrhage is seen in any form of hepatic obstruction, not like Budd-Chiari.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. So how will you differentiate a standard Budd-Chiari from sinusoidal obstruction syndrome?
Usually there will be sinusoidal dilatation, marked sinusoidal dilatation in Budd-Chiari, which can also be seen in SOS. So the central vein collapse is more specific for sinusoidal obstruction syndrome.
Central vein collapse.
Yeah, central vein collapse is
Okay.
more specific, but it has to be seen in the right clinical context. It is important.
We also
The presentation, I think, may be different because
we also hear about a vascular condition called teleosis hepatis, where blood-filled areas of
cystic
the liver.
spaces are there. Yeah, yes, sir.
Okay, so it will be something like this or different?
No, sir. You'll see blood-filled hepatic spaces, and it won't look like this. It's not like that.
Okay, next we'll have GI pathology. We'll have more of interactive session. So I will request the residents to be ready. Is Kurula ready? Are you ready?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So whenever ma'am asks questions, you can answer.
Okay, sir.
So before going into this, so I'll just tell you how we see a normal colonic biopsy looks like. So when we see a normal colonic biopsy, we see the surface epithelium, the crypts. Then I'll tell you the normal mucosa first. These are the crypts. This is the lamina propria, and this is the muscularis mucosa. So when we see a mucosal biopsy, we see whether the surface epithelium is intact or not, whether the crypt architecture is maintained or distorted, the status of the crypt epithelium, whether it's infiltrated by neutrophils or any other inflammatory cells. We see the lamina propria cellularity. That means we see whether it's increased, normal, or decreased. If it is increased, whether it's diffuse, whether it's patchy, or whether it's focal. We look for any infiltrates or organisms or deposits in the mucosa, and we see the status of the muscularis mucosa and submucosa. Sometimes we may get some. In several cases, we do get a little bit of submucosa in the biopsies. Can you tell me what?
So, madam,
This is
sir. It looks like endoscopic findings look like a continuous ulceration, sir. Looks like ulcerative colitis, sir.
So diffuse mucosal involvement. That is what
diffuse mucosal. diffuse mucosal involvement, sir. And the histopathology specimen shows crypt architectural distortion.
Yeah, this is the normal. On your left-hand side, this is normal crypt. And here, other than that, distortion crypt, other than the distortion of crypts,
Increased lymphocytic infiltration, madam.
Yeah. Okay, so there is intense inflammation. So here what we are seeing is there is there's marked crypt architectural distortion with diffuse transmucosal inflammation. Transmucosal, that means it is limited to the mucosa mainly. And then you have formation of, there is damage to the crypt epithelium. You can see a crypt abscess here, that is neutrophils within the crypt lumen. This is another view, which is showing again distortion of crypt architecture, a dense inflammation in the lamina propria. These are crypt abscesses here. And cryptitis. Cryptitis is nothing but a neutrophilic infiltration of the crypt epithelium. This is another view which shows again distortion. Again, you can see a sort of a villiform architecture of the crypts. There is basal plasmacytosis. That means there is presence of plasma cells between the base of the crypt and the muscularis mucosa.
So this is basically active ulcerative colitis. Is that?
Yes, sir. This is active ulcerative colitis.
Can we definitely say it's ulcerative colitis, or is it a non-specific finding?
No, sir. These are all specific findings. There is ulceration. There is crypt architectural distortion. There is presence of crypt. There are crypt abscesses, cryptitis, basal plasmacytosis, and a diffuse transmucosal inflammation. Transmucosal.
Okay.
This is a crypt which shows a crypt abscess, and here if you see, these are aggregates of histiocytes. So this is a cryptolytic granuloma which can be seen in ulcerative colitis, and this is not these kind of granulomas are not seen in Crohn's disease. It can be, these are usually seen in ulcerative colitis. This is not the what I mean is these cryptolytic granulomas are not to be confused with the granulomas of Crohn's disease.
It was not very clear, Dr. Anna. What type of granuloma?
Cryptolytic. Cryptolytic.
That
This
means
is because there is a damage to the crypt epithelium. There is extravasation of mucin, and this reaction is caused due to the extravasation or spillage of mucin into the surrounding tissue.
Okay.
So, case in ulcerative colitis, there is widespread crypt architectural distortion with crypt branching, atrophy, irregular villus architecture. There is diffuse or continuous transmucosal inflammation. It's not transmural, it is transmucosal inflammation with basal plasmacytosis associated with active component causing cryptitis and crypt abscesses. And the intensity of inflammation increases towards the rectum. Other points which are helpful are there is mucin depletion, that is, there is reduction in the number of goblet cells, and there will be surface ulceration or erosion. One thing to remember is basal plasmacytosis is the earliest diagnostic feature. A preserved crypt architecture with absence of transmucosal inflammatory cell infiltrate does not rule out early UC. So in these cases, a repeat biopsy no sooner than 6 weeks is recommended in suspected cases. This I've put a case of infective colitis, and you can see there is intense inflammation, but if you see the crypt architecture is fairly well maintained. And most of the lamina propria will show more of neutrophils, the acute inflammatory cells, rather than chronic inflammatory cells. So when we see a case of ulcerative colitis or IBD, we have to say whether there is dysplasia or not. So in this case, we call it as negative for dysplasia, indeterminate for dysplasia, with low grade dysplasia, and with high grade dysplasia. So negative for dysplasia is when we have no doubt about the dysplasia. Now this biopsy, we will call it indefinite for dysplasia because we are not sure whether it is a true dysplastic process or a reparative process. Now this case, we will consider a diagnosis of a low grade dysplasia because if you see the cells have crowded, there is tubular form, it's got a tubular configuration. The cells have crowded, though still they're still at the lower third of the epithelium. And this dysplastic process extends onto the surface. There is no surface maturation, and you can see the dysplastic process involving the surface. This is where you see when we start seeing both cytological and architectural atypia, we have to think of high grade dysplasia. And this, if you see, there is complete loss of polarity. The cells are haphazardly arranged, going almost up to the top. These are closely packed glands, and there is atypia at the site. The cells show atypia with abnormal mitosis. This is an abnormal mitotic figure. So this case, we will say it's ulcerative colitis with high-grade dysplasia.
Can I intervene for a while?
Yes, sir.
Dr. Kuruvilla, why
sir.
are you interested about the dysplasia in ulcerative colitis?
Sir, if it is dysplasia, you have to undergo colectomy.
No, when do you think? When do you suspect this entity? Is that every ulcerative colitis? Suppose somebody had ulcerative colitis for 1 year and you have taken biopsy when there is active disease.
No, usually after 8 years, we have to do colonoscopic surveillance.
First and foremost, one should never ask for dysplasia when there is severe activity. Ma'am just mentioned that as a part of reparative process, we can find dysplastic changes. They will be finding it difficult to consider it as a neoplastic process. So one should never ask for dysplasia when there is active inflammation. Active inflammation could settle down, and then perhaps you take biopsy, specifically looking for dysplasia. Dysplasia is generally long-standing disease. For people with entire colon affected, more than 10 years, and people with left colon affected, maybe 15 or 20 years. Okay. So for entire colon, anybody having a disease for more than 10 years, during the follow-up, you may have to do surveillance colonoscopy and biopsy to look for dysplasia. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Over to Dr. Ayana.
So this is a case of ulcerative colitis not responding to treatment. Can anyone say what they're seeing?
Sadish, are you there? Ulcerative colitis patient on steroids, but not responding to treatment. So the pathologist was asked to look at the biopsy again, and they have seen something. What do you think it is? The pointer is on something. Clinically, what do you suspect when your patient is not responding? Patient has been on steroid, patient has been on azathioprine, and patient is not improving.
Sir, any associated infection,
Yes.
CMV colitis?
Yes,
So,
CMV colitis. That is one you suspect. So, what do you ask a pathologist?
to look for the inclusion bodies.
Okay. Do you think these are inclusion bodies? Okay, ma'am.
Sir,
So yeah, here you can see these are endothelial cells. They are enlarged. They're showing both cytomegaly and nucleomegaly, that is increase in the cell size and the nuclei. And here you can see these amphiphilic or basophilic inclusions surrounded by a halo. So CMV affects mainly the endothelial cells or the mesenchymal stromal cells. However, it has been described even in the crypts, in the epithelium. And if we are in doubt, we can also do an IHC, where you can see the CMV infected cells as brown spots here.
So, is just presence of CME findings like this enough to confirm a diagnosis of CME infection? Or do you think strong serological support?
So we would recommend a serological this thing also, and we have IHC, so we go ahead and do the IHC for CMV.
Immunohistochemistry, so that
Yes,
you can
we
confirm.
do. We can confirm. So we do. When in doubt, we always do an IHC.
Okay, great. Go ahead, please.
Sir, anyone can describe this?
Remnish, are you there? Dr. Remnish, are you there? If you are not there, Dr. Samir Kumar, Global Chennai.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Sir, here there is an ulceration and so aphthalic lesion.
Yes.
The biopsy is showing almost entire mucosa, submucosa, and lymphoplasmacytic infiltrate is there throughout the this thing. And but here there is a small ulceration, ma'am,
Yeah.
that is
So-
showing exudate, probably like a volcano ulcer.
No. Okay, I'll tell you. This is an aphthous ulcer. You can see here. This is an aphthous ulcer.
Samir, just 1 second. Samir, what are these ulcers on the endoscopy on the left side? Left
Ma'am,
lower
these
corner?
are after ulcers, ma'am.
On top, the one below that, or
These are
non-linear ulcers?
linear ulcer, yes,
What's your
ma'am.
diagnosis? The
Probably
thing is-
Crohn's.
So
Crohn's disease.
why are you considering the possibility of a C. diff?
Yes.
So with that in context, now describe what is seen in the histology.
Yes, ma'am. So
Think
probably
the
this is
patient
Crohn's disease.
So what's the finding on histology that you expect?
Ma'am, lymphoplasmacytic infiltration is there, and there here in the downslide there is a granulomatous lesion towards 9 o'clock. Granuloma is there towards 9 o'clock. And
What is being highlighted is the top one, a little bit of giant cell formation. You can just almost make it out.
okay.
A subtle loose granuloma. No, they're not those tight compact ones.
Yes, ma'am.
So don't make this type of a mistake. No, suddenly you think of C. diff and then you say volcano ulcers. When you're seeing a different, that's what I'm saying. History is very important and correlate that with the histology.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, Dr. Aina.
So this is an ulcer, which is again you're seeing a non-caseating granuloma here, and this is a deep ulcer, which is replaced by granulation tissue. This is the biopsy of the ileum, where you see there's a patchy inflammation which is happening, which is seen here, whereas here there's normal cellularity of the lamina propria. This is again a discrete small granuloma in the colon. This picture is not very good, but I wanted to show you how an aphthous ulcer looks. Aphthous ulcer is basically erosion of the epithelium overlying a lymphoid aggregate. This erosion overlying a lymphoid aggregate, and this erosion is replaced by neutrophils on the surface. This is a picture again where you're seeing again a non-caseating granuloma. This is a microgranuloma in the colon where microgranulomas is a collection of 3 to 7 histiocytes. Now, in many cases of Crohn's disease, we will see something known as focal active colitis, wherein the mucosal biopsy will appear normal, the infiltrate in the lamina propria is normal, but we will see crypts with neutrophilic infiltration and surrounded by inflammatory cells, scattered foci. These are the focal active lesions.
In our parlance, we also call it focal enhanced colitis, focal enhanced
Enhanced
gastritis, something like that also.
Yeah, sir. So this is a gastric antral biopsy where you can see a granuloma here again. There's another.
Dr. Samir, will you get positive finding like granuloma if you take biopsy from the normal rectal mucosa, normal gastric mucosa, duodenal mucosa, etc. in a suspected case of Crohn's disease?
Yes, sir. We can get granulomas can be present, sir. So it is recommended to do
So we
biopsy
can
from
have-
stomach.
Yeah, okay. So we can have focal enhanced inflammation, focal enhanced gastritis, as well as granuloma in an uninvolved or endoscopically apparently normal area. So in a suspected Crohn's disease, we take biopsy even from uninvolved areas. So the presence of a granuloma in a clinically uninvolved area is highly diagnostic of Crohn's disease. Am I right?
Yes, sir. Presence of granulomas, focal enhanced lesions. We may even see sometimes patchy inflammation, even if the colonoscopy looks normal. This is again a gastric antral biopsy. Again, you can see a granuloma here. There are 2 granulomas. This is another lesion, granuloma. There's a granuloma. There's a small microgranuloma here. So this is just to show you all the pictures together. This is the ileal biopsy where you are seeing a granuloma within the lymphoid follicle. This is the colon where you are seeing a non-caseating granuloma, intercryptal granuloma. And this is the stomach biopsy where you are seeing this is a focal enhanced inflammatory lesion where there is neutrophilic infiltration of the glandular epithelium surrounded by inflammatory cells, lymphocytes and plasma cells. And again, you can see a small granuloma here. So for Crohn's in the bowel, we see aphthous and deep ulcers with patchy inflammation, and in several cases, though not all, we see non-caseating, non-confluent granulomas and including microgranulomas. In the antrum, we see focal enhanced lesions and granulomas. We can see. Anyone tell me what this is?
Okay, next is Dr. Johan. Are you there? Rohan?
Yes, sir, I'm there. Sir. Yes.
Okay. So
So-
46-year-old female presented with a 3-month history of diffuse pain abdomen, low-grade fever, and loss of weight and appetite. This is the endoscopy finding.
Finding,
Yes, sir.
describe the finding.
Which part of GI tract it looks like?
The ileocecal region.
Ileocecal region.
Yeah.
Yes. This is the IC valve. This is a patulous IC valve. I can see the terminal ileum from the IC valve, and I can see a ulcer, a stellate ulcer inside, a transverse ulcer in the on the ileal side of the IC valve. And I can also see a few pseudopolyps on the outer lip of the IC valve.
Not pseudopolyps, they're just polypoid lesions. And
Polypoid.
It's a patulous. It's a patulous ileocecal valve. So what's your diagnosis?
So my differential diagnosis for this would be either ileocecal tuberculosis or Crohn's disease. These would be the
You have to
closest difference.
differentiate between the two, Rohan. You cannot just say both, no? So when
Yes,
you get ileocecal involvement,
Which one you prefer?
So
Take
looking
care
at
of the history. Just think of the history also.
yes, sir. Yes, sir. So taking the clinical perspective into aspect, then ileocecal tuberculosis is more likely in this case, with a very
Okay.
short history, with weight loss, abdominal pain in a 46-year-old lady. So I would like to keep as ileocecal tuberculosis as the first.
So when you take biopsy, what all things you will request?
Biopsy, I would like to first send for histopathology. Along with
Okay.
that, I would also like to send for expert MTB ref, that is gene expert. And I would also like to send biopsy for MJET, that is Mycobacterium culture, and AFB
Culture
stain.
also.
Yes.
Is there any difference at the site where you take biopsy when you take for a bacteriological study and for a histopathological study?
We
You
take.
have an ulcer. So
Yes, sir.
how do you do it?
We take biopsies from both the edges of the ulcer as well as the base of the ulcer, and send it for both histology and this tuberculosis.
You should contain more necrotic tissue in the center of the ulcer for microbiological studies, and from the edges more for histopathological. That is the standard teaching. Okay, over to Dr.
Yes.
Ayana.
Can you describe this also? What you're seeing here?
So here I can see a granuloma, a macrogranuloma over here, and I can see a Langerhans giant cell over here, probably.
Several. So it's a large confluent granuloma.
caseation,
with central caseation. Yes, ma'am.
Ma'am, I'll focus. The caseation is in the next slide.
There's a large granuloma with a lot of Langerhans changes.
Yeah. This is a
that homogeneous is not caseation. The one
no,
next-
ma'am. Unlikely. It doesn't look like
What do you call
caseation.
that? What do you
No.
call that?
The
Carry on, madam.
okay. Yeah.
Carry on.
Okay. This is a granuloma which appears a large granuloma which appears to be. It seems to be as if there are 2-3 granulomas appearing to coalesce. This is a central case. This is caseation necrosis here. You can see the epithelioid cells here at the periphery, with central area showing granular appearance, granular necrosis. Can you tell me what this is? What you see
This is
here?
a Ziehl-Neelsen stain, the AFB stain. I can see a bacillus, acid-fast bacillus over there.
Yeah, it's a beaded. You see it as a beaded structure.
Beaded. Yes.
So this is the confirmatory evidence of tuberculosis, presence of caseation, and the finding of acid-fast bacilli if you are lucky in a biopsy. So just how to differentiate a Crohn's and a tuberculosis.
Okay, carry on.
Okay, coming to granulomas, the granulomas in Crohn's disease are usually small, discrete, non-caseating, non-confluent, whereas tuberculous granulomas will be large, multiple, confluent, and caseating. AFB stain is negative, whereas in Crohn's, whereas it will be positive in a few cases in tuberculosis. Focal enhanced lesions, pericryptal granulomas, and microgranulomas are can be seen in Crohn's disease, whereas these are usually they are absent in tuberculosis. Antral lesions are usually seen in Crohn's and usually not seen in tuberculosis. However, this is debatable now. So, but we also, when we are seeing, we do give weightage to the antral biopsies when we are looking into a case in a patient who's got Crohn's, where we are suspecting Crohn's or tuberculosis. So we do look at the antral biopsies.
Okay, thank you, Rohan.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am.
So this is just to show you the granulomas of tuberculosis, where you can see a big granuloma, huge, almost confluent granuloma, and a small granuloma of Crohn's disease. Actually, if anybody who's interested, they should look through these articles by Professor Anna Pulimuth. She had these are landmark articles, 2 of them. So if you want, you can just go through it, because she's described this Crohn's and TB in detail. The size, the number, everything they have written a good 2 articles on it.
Okay. Aniket, are you there, Aniket?
Yes, sir.
Okay, please.
This is the colonoscopic pictures showing a pedunculated polyp.
So, is it important to know the histology, or you just remove it by polypectomy?
No, so it is. It looks like almost 2 to 3 centimeter polyp, and plus surface shows some erosions. Therefore, it looks. If possible, I will see the NBI image also.
Okay, you will do that. If possible, you will do NBA and try to find whether it is in your past. My question is, are you interested to know the histology, or simply remove it?
Yes,
and
sir.
then forget about it? Patient came with perhaps some bleeding. You did colonoscopy, you found the polyp. You just do polypectomy and throw it away. Is that the pattern? Is it just routinely you do the send everything for pathology, or are you specifically looking for something else?
So, since it is a very big polyp, therefore I'm interested in doing the biopsy of this polyp.
What are the usual types of polyps biopsy you can? What are the histological types you get? This is 6-year-old. Younger people, generally, what do you get?
So in younger people, we may get low grade or high grade dysplasia, but here we are suspecting malignancy.
Okay, you may get hyperplastic polyps, and then you can get adenomatous polyps. Okay, now over to Dr. Ayana. So,
coming to adenomatous polyps, now we all know these are they are composed of dysplastic epithelium. We get 3 types of adenomas in the colon. One is the tubular adenoma, where the tubular adenomas. Then there's a villus adenoma, where more than 75% of the polyp is composed of villus structures, and a tubular villus adenoma, where the villus component is at least 25%. Can anyone describe this quickly?
Aniket, can you identify this?
It looks like a tubular adenoma.
You are not too clear. Can you make it louder, clearer?
Tubular adenoma, sir. It looks like tubular adenoma.
You think it is a tubular adenoma?
Yeah. So this is a tubular adenoma. Now, below, this is the normal bowel. You can see the lining is replaced by dysplastic epithelium. It's mainly tubules, appearing to be lined by epithelium, which is crowded. This is the hyperview, where you can see pencil-shaped nuclei, hyperchromatic nuclei, but they are still confined to the lower third of the tubules. This one, Aniket, what do you think this is? Which type of polyp is this?
Ma'am, this is villus adenoma.
Yeah, most of the polyp is composed of the villus structure, so we will call this as a villus adenoma. And this one, you have two, both.
Ma'am, it looks like a mixture of both. Then it will
Yeah.
be a tubulovillus.
Yeah, so these are the tubular structures and these are the villi. So we call it a tubulovillus adenoma. So when we look into the adenomas, we have to see we get areas of low grade dysplasia and high grade dysplasia. High grade is very, very important. Now, if you compare it with the previous adenomatous polyps, which I've shown you, there is both cytological and architectural atypia. You can see the glands appear a little more crowded. There is cribiforming, that is, it is forming sieve-like structures. The cells are also showing atypia, and there is increased mitosis. These are the mitotic figures, and there's one above also. So this is a tubular adenoma with high-grade dysplasia.
So all residents, please read up when you do a polypectomy and the specimen turns out to be high-grade dysplasia. Will you just stop at that level, or what all additional things you will do? That is one which you have to read. Okay, this is a standard question. The type of polyps and what you do after polypectomy. Okay.
Yes. Coming to the colorectal serrated lesions, this was what was followed on the left-hand side. This was the 2010 WHO edition. Now, 2019 WHO edition has removed the mucin-poor subtype of the hyperplastic polyp. The sessile serrated adenoma / polyp has been, the term has been changed to sessile serrated lesion and sessile serrated lesion with dysplasia. The TSA remains the same, and they have added a serrated adenoma unclassified, which is a newer term. Before I go into the sessile serrated lesion, I will just tell you what hyperplastic polyps are. You have to understand what a hyperplastic polyp is. The hyperplastic polyp, you get the superficial, there is serration of the superficial epithelium. The crypts are arranged, but they are maintained. The architecture is maintained. The basal portions do not show any dilatation, and they show serration, that is a sawtooth appearance of the crypts, which is not seen in the basal portions, and the architecture is fairly well maintained. This is a hyper view, again showing sawtooth appearance of the crypts. Now, how do we diagnose a sessile serrated lesion? There are criteria to call it a sessile serrated lesion. That is, when we see a horizontal growth along the muscularis mucosa, this is the muscularis mucosa, you are seeing the horizontal growth of the crypt along the muscularis mucosa, giving it a L-shaped. Plus, there is dilatation of the dilatation at the base of the crypts here, and the serrations extend they extend up to the base of the crypt. So the earlier WHO had said you should see 3 consecutive crypts with this kind of thing, with this kind of morphology to call it a sessile serrated adenoma. But the current consensus is that even if we see one unequivocal architectural distorted serrated crypt, it is enough to call it as a sessile serrated lesion. If there is atypia associated with it, we call it a sessile serrated lesion with dysplasia. Now, this is a tubular traditional serrated adenoma where you have 3 important things. One is, this is a polyp which has centrally arranged pencillate nuclei. You can see the pencil-shaped nuclei, with dense eosinophilic cytoplasm, and you have the slit-like serrations in between, just like how you see in a small bowel, with ectopic crypt formation here. Ectopic crypt formation is basically small crypts which do not extend to the base, which do not extend to the muscularis mucosa. Here you can see ectopic crypt formation. This is another view which shows, you can see the pencil-shaped nuclei, dense cytoplasm, slit-like serrations here, and ectopic crypt formation. So this is a traditional serrated adenoma.
Okay, thank you, Aniket. Tejasvi, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Okay, next. 30-year-old male history of mucus institutes. Quite for some, maybe 6 months or so, and some degree of difficult. So
rectal biopsy.
Auditory rectal ulcer.
Can you describe the ulcer?
So, Sir, it's clean based, more as a filling defect. It may be around 20 millimeter across. And the base of the ulcer is not really vascular.
Okay. Is it only is the only morphological appearance of solitary rectal ulcer? Is there any other mode?
Sir, or it could be just a tear, not exactly.
No, our textbook says solitary ulcer need not be solitary. One, it need not be ulcer. Third, it also says you can have a polypoidal form also, which is more often recognized nowadays. Okay. Okay, over to Dr. Anna.
Okay, so what do you see here in this? Can you just describe? If you remember the previous normal biopsy of the colon, and what do you see here? Any change? Okay. So what you see here is there is erosion. The lamina propria shows fibrous obliteration of the lumen. There are these telangiectatic vessels within the lamina propria.
Ramya, please mute. Ramya, please mute.
And
Okay.
there is splaying of smooth muscle fibers from the muscularis mucosa into the lamina propria. You can see the splaying of muscle fibers, the smooth muscle fibers here. So this is the case of solitary rectal ulcer syndrome. Another thing which you notice here is there is paucity, or there is a reduction in the number of inflammatory cells. Coming to small bowel, I'll quickly tell you how small bowel looks. You have these villi covered by enterocytes and a few goblet cells. Between the base of the villi are the crypts, which extend into the muscularis mucosa. The normal crypt to villus ratio is 4 to 5:1, and the epithelium is mainly lined by the columnar absorptive cells, mucin secrete, goblet cells, and a few endocrine cells. Anyone can.
Snija, are you there?
Sir.
Okay, Snija, this is a 7-year-old boy, diarrhea and steatorrhea. Of course, you know, TTG positive means you know the diagnosis. So you just tell us what do you see from the histology?
This is a normal bowel. I've given this for comparison.
This is normal.
This is normal, the left-hand corner. Anything here you see?
So which is the one which is abnormal, the right lower one?
So this is a normal bowel. This is. Can I go ahead and describe, sir?
Yeah, please.
Okay, here we see there are no villi. Here you are seeing villi and crypts, the fairly well-maintained architecture. Here you are seeing flattening of villi. There are hardly any villi, and this villi is blunted. So there is villus atrophy here. Along with that, there is crypt elongation. There is crypt hyperplasia. That is, there is elongated. We are seeing elongated crypts appearing to be lined by crowded epithelium. Another feature which we see, which is important, is the presence of intraepithelial lymphocytes. You can see there is a hyper view of this area. You can see the lymphocytes, these dot-like structures infiltrating the enterocytes. Here again, you can see these lymphocytes infiltrating the enterocytes, the surface enterocytes. So what we see here in celiac is there are increased intraepithelial T lymphocytes. 25 to 29 intraepithelial lymphocytes per 100 enterocytes is considered borderline. More than 30 IELs per 100 enterocytes consider a pathological lymphocytosis. Along with that, there is villus atrophy, that is decrease in the villus height. There is alteration of the normal crypt-villus ratio until there is total disappearance of this villi. And this assessment, we have to have proper orientation of the biopsies. Along with that, there is crypt hyperplasia, which is characterized by increase in crypt length with increase in mitosis, and enterocytes appear crowded. We follow the modified Marsh system for grading, which is based on the presence of IELs, crypt hyperplasia, and villi. This is a simpler, the lower portion, the lower half shows a simpler way of grading the celiac disease. So anyone can.
Santosh, are you there? Medical Trust. Santosh? If Santosh
Yes,
is
sir.
not Jagdish,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Santosh is there. Okay, Santosh.
Yes, sir. Sir, it shows a mucosal edema with whitish patches in the small bowel, and probably looks like a lymphangiectasia.
What are those whitish things? Is it reflection or something else?
No, sir. It is looks like probably lymphangiectasia.
Okay, you think it is lymphangiectasia. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, here. Do you see
You're
anything?
Uh,
So,
ma'am,
yeah, tell me.
ma'am, that
You attempt to describe it. You are finding, you're saying some findings, no?
yes, sir. Yes, sir. That lymphatic ectasias are there. I mean, dilatation
Dilated.
with
Yeah.
dilated,
Yeah.
and lipid-laden cells.
No. Focus on the dilated lymphatics. This is lymphangiectasia. You said so. Lymphangiectasia means there is dilatation of the lymphatics. You
Yes,
see
madam.
dilated lymph spaces which are lined by flattened endothelial cells.
Okay.
So this is a case of intestinal lymphangiectasia.
Okay, ma'am.
This anyone can say. Is there any?
Jagdish, Kims?
Yes, sir.
Okay, this is a small bowel biopsy reflect. What do you think it is?
Sir, there is
This
loss
is a
of
striking
villi, sir.
picture. Pardon?
Loss of villi, sir.
No.
Villi actually you are seeing, no? The first left panel.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Left panel I am seeing.
Any history relevant?
Mm,
Is it chronic?
no, sis. No. Sorry.
No.
Yeah.
You're chronic.
Yeah, I've started said the thing. Yeah. So this what you see the villus morphology is normal. The upper 2/3 of the villi you see lipid laden, vacuolated or clear enterocytes. So this is a case of A beta lipoproteinemia, and you can see the normal enterocytes here. These are the ones which are affected.
These are the patients having acanthocytosis, no? Or the smears, something like that.
Panza?
They have some blood pressure abnormalities also, no?
Yeah, they can, I think.
Okay. Next is Dr. Praveen. Are you there?
Yes, sir. I'm here, sir.
Praveen.
Yes, sir.
Okay. What do you think? It's a D1 submucosal lesion.
It's a
What are the
D1
differential diagnosis?
Probably GIST or NET.
GIST. One is GIST. Second is NET. Neuroendocrine tumor. Okay. Anything else? Some congenital something can also. Some congenital also lesion also can. Okay. Dr. Ayana, please.
So can you describe what we see here? This is, you are right, but the differential is this neuroendocrine versus GIST. What is it that you're seeing here? Can I go ahead and describe that, sir?
Yes, sir. Chromatin granules. They mentioned salt and pepper chromatin granules.
Yeah, so you're seeing nests of tumor cells here. Okay,
Yes.
arranged in small acinar pattern in nesting pattern, and here you see the cells with the salt and pepper chromatin. Okay, this tumor usually has a solid insular or a nesting trabecular or glandular masses of monotonous small round cells with or without peripheral palisading. The cytoplasm is moderately granular and it has a small nucleoli and a salt and pepper chromatin. So if we do IHC, these neuroendocrine cells will be positive for synaptophysin, chromogranin, Lu7 and CD56, and we have to do a Ki67 proliferation index. Now this is the recommended grading system for well-differentiated gastroenteropancreatic neuroendocrine neoplasms, where it is divided as grade well-differentiated neuroendocrine tumor, grade 1, 2, and 3, and it is based on the mitotic rate and the MIB1 proliferation index. This is the tumor cells which are showing positivity for synaptophysin. You can see all the brown it's all cytoplasmic. The brown color, this is positive for synaptophysin. The same immunostaining you will see with chromogranin. And this is the MIB1 proliferation index, where you can see these brown. The MIB1 proliferation index is stains the nuclei. The Ki67 stains the nuclei. So we have to do a count of 100 or up to 500 cells is the recommendation to see to assess proper MIB1 proliferation activity index. So the next 3 are spotters. So if they can just quickly say what they are. This.
Dr. Kushan, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Child with chronic small bowel diarrhea, hyperproteinemia, normal small bowel mucosa on imaging, biopsy.
Sir, some parasitic infection probably, sir, because this looks like
Describe what you
Giardia. Sir,
Giardia.
this Giardia trophozoites are present, sir.
Your guess was right, but diagnosis is not right. Giardia, where do you find? Is it does it invade the mucosa that much, or you
No,
find
sir.
it on
It is
surface?
mainly superficial, sir.
See, you look at the Giardia is a unicellular organism, no? And
Yes,
here
sir.
you look at this things are much bigger than the size of an average cell, maybe 20, 30 or 50 times the size. And you find empty spaces and something which is cut like this, no? Okay, if you have seen the histology once, okay, strongyloids, yes. This is a spotter which is kept in most of the examination. All PGs, all residents, please go and look at the histology picture of strongyloids because this is important. Okay, Dr. Aina, please.
So this strongyloides usually you see larval forms or the eggs in the crypt epithelium within the crypts. Okay, Giardiasis, I'll show you. Okay, the next one.
Yeah, here is what you find. Can you identify Dr. Kushra?
Yes, sir. Here, sir, I mean, the mucosa is normal, but above the mucosa, we can see the trophozoites, sir.
Yeah. So it is
So this
almost
is
like
Giardiasis.
on the
Yeah.
surface.
Giardiasis.
So they look like crescent shaped or moon shaped, crescent moon or sickle shaped. Sorry, and it is seen along the luminal epithelium. They are not infiltrating the epithelium. This one. This is a colonoscopic biopsy.
This is amoebic colitis problem.
Yeah. So you see these trophozoites of.
Are you sure?
Yes, sir, because the hemophagocytosis is there, sir.
Okay, we find good.
So these are trophozoites of Entamoeba histolytica. And here, if you see, they contain ingested RBCs. Here. Anything? This is another case. This is anything you see. This is small bowel. Do you see anything?
Ma'am, eosinophils are present in large number.
There is a marked increase. There is an increase in eosinophils. This is small bowel biopsy, where again you can see an increase in the number of eosinophils. These eosinophils are seen infiltrating the crypt epithelium, and they can also be present within the crypt lumen, forming eosinophilic crypt abscesses. So basically, there is no, what they have said is excess eosinophils in the intestine could be considered a multiple of a maximum count found in normal biopsy. So for example, in the duodenal biopsy, if we are seeing normal eosinophils are around 626, then we have to see double. Same thing in ileum, but these are not absolutes. Along with that, you have to see eosinophilic presence of clustering of eosinophils, presence of eosinophils within the crypt epithelium. You have to see it within it will be seen within the lumen, and also eosinophils will be seen can be seen in the muscularis mucosa and submucosa. You have to make a diagnosis of eosinophilic enteritis in correlation with the clinical picture.
Okay, Dr. Kuruvilla, are you there?
Yes, sir. I am there, sir.
The
Sir,
context is very straightforward.
eosinophilic esophagitis, sir, because of the furrowing and circular rings with linear furrows.
Okay.
So what do you see here? So
Again, madam, eosinophilic infiltration usually
Of
not
what?
seen in the esophagus.
yeah, so this is the squamous epithelium, and you see dense eosinophilic infiltration of the epithelium with formation of abscess here. Along with that, there can be degranulation of eosinophils as also, or breakdown of eosinophils.
So where do you
So
take
to-
biopsy, Dr. Kurula, in the case of eosinophilic esophagitis, upper, middle, or lower?
All area, 6 to 8 biopsies from all areas, sir.
Pardon?
6 to 8 biopsies
This is the
from
maximum site where you can have the maximum involvement.
lower areas, sir.
Okay, but in sometimes the patient may have reflex esophagitis, then there will be confusion.
Okay,
That's
sir.
why it is also taken from the middle area.
Middle areas.
Okay, what is the normal eosinophilic content of the
Esophagus
esophageal
doesn't have
mucosa?
esophagus doesn't have any eosinophils, sir.
Okay, your Schlesinger says in pediatrics there is no eosinophilic infiltration, but in adults 0 to 5 may be there. But in pediatric, but some of the examiners are very particular, and I have seen this question being asked repeatedly in Viva. What is the esophageal? What is the number of eosinophils seen in esophagus? Okay, so they expect normally no. Am
Okay,
I
sir.
right, Dr. Ayana?
yes, sir. Yes.
Okay, carry on.
So the criteria is they have specified the number. The number should be more than 15 eosinophils per high power field. In this, and then along with that, there should be clustering or micro abscesses of eosinophils with degranulation or breakdown of eosinophils to call it eosinophilic esophagitis.
I think from 5 to
And
15 in reflex disease also
we
one
can
can have
see
eosinophils. Yeah.
we can see, so therefore we have to sometimes repeat biopsy after treatment with after treatment of reflux should be again done to assess the eosinophils.
Okay.
This H. pylori gastritis. Now, what we see is there are a couple of things which we see when we see H. pylori chronic gastritis with chronic H. pylori gastritis. There is infiltration of the lamina propria by lymphocytes, by plasma cells, lymphocytes, few eosinophils, and variable number of neutrophils. The neutrophils are found in and around the epithelium, which line the gastric pits, and they're also infiltrating this. They're seen to infiltrate the surface and glandular epithelium. Lymphoid follicles are a common feature. And then, of course, you have to identify the identification of H. pylori organism on the surface epithelium. Now, this is a normal gastric biopsy. If you see here, there is again the cellularity of the lamina propria is increased. There's a dense infiltrate of inflammatory cells with lymphoid follicle formation. And here again, if you see, there are these neutrophils here in between, in a background of lymphocytes and plasma cells. The neutrophils appear to infiltrate the glandular epithelium. Can anyone quickly describe what we see here?
Karthik?
And this special stain.
Sir, madam, sir, this is the special stain demonstrates the bacillus, ma'am, H. pylori bacillus.
Yeah, what
which
special
is seen
stain?
in the sorry, madam.
What special stain?
What's the special stain used in this case to demonstrate H. pylori in the gastric mucosa or outside on the surface?
Ma'am, Giemsa stain.
Yeah, it's Giemsa. So here you can see curvilinear organisms overlying the foveolar epithelium again. Here you can see Giemsa, these curvilinear organisms. So the stain is Giemsa stain for H. pylori.
Aniket, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So this endoscopic picture showing Barrett esophagus. So there is the patch of mucosa, this mucosa extending in the esophagus.
Okay, what is the
Like
latest?
projection.
You know the latest classification. Please read up that classification. Okay, we won't say that for sake of time, ma'am. You please carry on.
Pratt classification.
So this is again, you see the esophageal lining esophageal epithelium. It is replaced by columnar, metaplastic columnar epithelium, which includes a lot of these goblet cells. Same thing what you see in an intestine, large bowel. You can see the architecture has become villiform, again replaced by this metaplastic columnar epithelium with goblet cells. This is the Alcian blue stain, which is used to highlight the goblet cells. This takes up a blue color. Now, when we see Barrett's, we have to look for areas of dysplasia, which is very important, and any carcinoma. So this is the spectrum, how the Barrett's, this is Barrett's going into low-grade, with areas of low-grade dysplasia, high-grade dysplasia, and carcinoma. So when you see Barrett's here, this is a gland where it is showing atypia. The cells are haphazardly arranged, and there is some atypia of the cells, of the nuclei. This is a biopsy which shows both cytological and architectural atypia. There is architectural atypia, it's thrown into villiform projections. There are irregular glands, and even at the cytological level, you see atypia of the epithelial cells. So this is a Barrett's esophagus with high-grade dysplasia. Just to show you, this is Barrett's esophagus. This is like Barrett's with low-grade dysplasia. That it looks similar to an adenomatous epithelium with crowding and but it's still confined to the lower third. This is Barrett's esophagus with high-grade dysplasia. You can see the architectural and cytological atypia, and this is with carcinoma areas, carcinomatous areas. This is just a carcinoma.
Thank you, Dr. Aina. That was a wonderful session, and I think you have covered the entire GI tract in evolving. Of course, in this session, 1.5 hours you have taken, but I think you have taken more than 100% justice to what I would say 1,000 times justice to what we have been allotted. In this small session, you have covered the entire GI tract, and that has been wonderful. Jayanti ma'am, you want to ask anything particular?
But yeah, good session.
You want to tell anything to the residents about what they should know about pathology and other things? Some tips.
The most important will be in context of the history taking. Without the history, you cannot make a diagnosis. Always, they will give you history. With that, to consider the differentials, especially in that fatty liver, they always ask the common question: alcohol versus HCV versus NASH. How to differentiate in steatosis? That's one common question. Common cases that they keep is one will be HBV, HCV, a fatty liver. You have the questions of all the three. These are the three common. And normally PSC, PBC does not come in. In luminal, it's usually a parasite, and you may have one case of ulcerative colitis or Crohn's disease. That's it. Crohn's and tuberculosis. These are the common ones that are kept in the exam as quarters. They're all towards the fag end of your presentation. Okay.
There was a question asked: is there any cutoff? Like in eosinophilic esophagitis, whether you have a cutoff for the number of eosinophils in stomach, small intestine, and large intestine. You said about
stomach. So stomach, there is a cutoff. They have said, I'll just check. It should be more than 30 eosinophils. I'll just tell you, sir. 1 second.
Okay.
I kind of, whereas in the colon they have not really specified. No. There was there was a specification, but earlier there was a number, but they've removed it. It's basically a marked increase in eosinophils, clustering, microabscess formation, and degranulation. We have to look at all these features. In eosinophilic gastritis, the features are: there should be more than 30 eosinophils per hypa field in more than or equal to 5 hypa fields, or more than 70 eosinophils per hypa field in more than or equal to 3 hypa fields. That is for stomach.
Please learn these cutoff values that may be asked in the examination. Okay, and I want to inform Dr. Aina that today 118 participants were there. That is a record highest for our session, and that shows the interest of the clinician, of course, apart from the residents, many clinicians also participated, and that shows the interest in pathology. Everyone wants to brush up their pathology and to have good correlation. And no doubt it was a wonderful session. We all really enjoyed. Dr. Saujan, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Saujan is the associate coordinator of our program. He is the consultant at Amala Hospital, but he seems to have some audio issue. Are you there? Okay. Are you there? Okay, so thank you once again, Dr. Ayana. You have done a great job, and we are all extremely.
Can you hear me now, sir? Yes, sir, I'm here. I'm here.
Okay, and there was we can take over. There was a request, Dr. Ayana, that can you share your slides so that the PGs can have your PowerPoint presentation.
Yes,
If
sir.
it is not,
I'll shall I
I will
send it?
send you my email. You
Yes,
can
I'll
send it
send
to
it
me, and
across.
I will share it to them so that
Yeah, sir.
they can periodically go through it and refresh their knowledge.
Okay, sir.
Okay.
Okay, I'll do that, sir. Thank you
Okay.
so much. Thank you for the opportunity.
Dr. Saujan, please.
Hello, ma'am.
Hello.
Yeah, I should especially thank you for the wonderful session that
You are
we
not
had
visible.
today. Not visible. Okay. Am I visible now, sir?
Yeah. You are visible. Then you have become not audible.
BTA can conclude.
Okay, Saujan seems to have some problem. Okay, so Dr. Ayana, thank you very much. We look forward to your help in future sessions as well. Maybe we can take sessions at a better pace. We can actually restrict to stomach or esophagus and maybe cover in more detail. So we look forward to your further cooperation, and thank you once again for joining us for this session, for agreeing to do this class and having done it superbly well. Okay, and you can go with the record. You go with the record. Okay.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much.
Okay.
I hope I've done justice. Thank you.
Thank you. Good
Thank
night.
you. Good night.
Good night
Good
to all
night.
of you. Good night, ma'am.
Good
Jayanti,
night.
ma'am.
Good night.